Do we have a link? You know, because people have been asking me for a link.
Oh, what to?
Okay.
Are we on?
Yes, we are.
We're on.
Yep.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Firstly, good to see you, Sheikh Zakariya and Sidi Mohammed, Ismail. It's our third week that we're meeting, alhamdulillah, to have some very, constructive discussions between ourselves while we have our evening cup of coffee, mashallah. Right? Maybe, yeah, thank you so much. You guys can tell me about your coffee cups also. It's good to see you people again to discuss meaningful issues that are affecting us as Muslims, wherever we may be, and how we engage these issues from a paradigm of Islam, of La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. Tonight, and I think we're all quite excited for this discussion between ourselves, is about a very important a book by one of our brothers, Brother Sizwe, Mpofu Walsh, who wrote this book called The New Apartheid. And personally, I really enjoyed reading this book for many reasons, and I'm excited to discuss this book. It's a book that I want to share with other people, and that we're going to unpack, some of the Dr. Sizwe's ideas in this book tonight between ourselves, because this is a book that we all should be reading as South Africans, particularly young South Africans, and especially as young South African Muslims. The book itself, really talks about the idea of the legacies of apartheid that continue to exist. And I feel like, as I was discussing these ideas with friends of mine, because I basically been making the bleach of this book, right? We oftentimes, if I can, use a metaphor, simile, we oftentimes think that apartheid starting and ending, or any moment in history starting and ending, it was like switching on and off a light switch, right? But really, history, and I think even people from within our own great civilization of Islam, like those that have studied history, the most famous amongst them being Imam Ibn Khaldun, rahimullah, that great Maliki jurist and mufti, who is the father of sociology, right? He put it, when you think about it, and I think he would concur with us, it's not actually moments in history, events in history, phases in history isn't like switching on and off a light, but more it's about when the sun rises in the morning, it moves through the different phases, its phases during the day, and the night comes in, and then the moon moves through the different phases of the night. Because when the sun rises in the morning, you don't just see everything bright. There's different shades to sunlight. There's zones of brightness and zones of darkness. The ambience created by the sun is different at different times of the day. Compare, let's say, sunrise, the amount of light at sunrise compared to at the time of Dhuhr. There is a difference. And then compare that to the time of Asr. And then when you look at Maghrib, and as the sun is already set and darkness is coming in, you can still see some light, but the sky is not pitch black. That only happens at the time of Isha. And when you look at the time of the Tahajjud, that's a time of almost like where the night is at its darkest and at its deepest. But even when it's at its darkest and at its deepest, there will be light, and that's the light of Fajr and the sunrise itself. But that's also the movement of history and events in history. So apartheid didn't just switch on and off. We got freedom in 1994 and a democratic government since 1994, and that means everything is well and good in South Africa. There's the legacies that apartheid created continue to exist, and our brother Sizwe Mpofu Walsh calls it the new apartheid, and this is the title of his book, How These Legacies Continue to Exist. And it's as if apartheid itself exists, but now apartheid is no more in the public realm. Apartheid exists in the private realm. But before I go any further, Maulana Zakariya, if you can tell us a little bit about the author himself, that would be beautiful.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's just a small introduction. His name is, as you said, Sizwe Mpofu Walsh. Born in 1989. MashaAllah, this is what we love, the youth, and it gives you that idea of the youth who were sitting around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and taking knowledge from him, and the Prophet loved the youth, and the ultimate is that the youth are the ones who will carry this message forward, and make the change. And subhanallah, I mean, 1989, still a youngster, he's still in his youth, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take him further and increase him in knowledge and use him as a guide for ourselves and the youth and for everybody. And he got his PhD in the University of Oxford. One of the things that is fascinating was that while in UCT, while studying in Cape Town, he received from the Muslim Student Association, the MSA, he was awarded with the Al-Ihsan Award. And we know that the Al-Ihsan Award is for the acknowledgement of young Muslims. So he's been an activist from a very young age. He's an activist. He's also a person who is, mashallah, when you read his book, you can see that he has probably read a lot. He's very, eloquent. And that's some of the things which I would like to make mention of when you're reading this book. It's not only reading, but, Ibn al-Jawzi makes mention, for example, that when you read a book, it should take you on a journey. And it takes you from place to place, from image to image, and that's why Ibn al-Jawzi wrote this under the heading of al-Qira'ah. And he said that the book is your friend. It never hurts you. It sleeps when you sleep. It wakes up when you wake up. It's always by your side. It never betrays you. It empowers you. It gives you knowledge. It takes you on a journey. It takes you from place to place free of charge. So he wrote this whole article on Al-Qira'ah, which is very beautiful. And when you're reading this, you actually appreciate the words of Ibn al-Jawzi. And mashallah, one of his first books that he made a debut that he brought was Democracy and Delusion, 10 Myths in South African Politics. And that was quite also an interesting book, which I hope that one of the days we could maybe get and read that one there as well. Mashallah, this is, he became, I actually wanted to make sure so that I don't misquote or just pull out from my pocket, but I phoned Sheikh Jamil Abrams from Bosmont, and he was the one that our beloved brother Sizwe took Shahada by, mashallah. So that is quite fascinating that he's the one that performed his. And the only way I got to know of this was that when they posted the book and that he's going to have an interview on the ulama page, then Sheikh Jamil mentioned that he took his shahada by him. And I asked him, Sheikh, what else can you tell me about this youngster, mashallah? He said, look, Mulana, he's very polite, very humble, and he's extremely intelligent. And you can see from this here that, mashallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has really awarded him with an excellent mind and with excellent qualities of taking in knowledge and giving it out. So this is something we are honored to actually discuss his book, and we hope that one day we can actually meet him, inshallah.
Inshallah. I must concur with you. I've had the opportunity of meeting him. A very lovely personality, I would say, a gentle soul, but an intellectual giant at the same time. Someone searching for the truth. His search for the truth led him to the deen, alhamdulillah. But his search for the truth also, as a Muslim, guides him to ask the very, very difficult questions that must be asked within the time and spaces that we are living in. So onto the book itself. How does, according to our brother Sizwe, how does apartheid continue to live, and how has it been privatized? Because throughout his book, he talks about this here, the privatization of apartheid. Apartheid did not die. Apartheid was privatized. He even mentions that on the cover of his book. And we know in the book itself, he's going to talk about, like different areas in which apartheid was privatized. So just paging through the contents here right now. He's going to talk about space, physical spaces, law, the law of our country, which we celebrate as South Africans, wealth, technology, and also the criminal justice system, the way crime is punished within the country. And this is really where we need to look at as, for example, how does apartheid continue to perpetuate itself, continue to exist, its legacies live on, and it continues to affect South Africans. Look at the riots that we've just lived through. Mohammed, Ismail, if I can prompt you, your thoughts.
Yeah, look, I think first it was nice reading a book that, I mean, amongst the other titles I've attempted to read in the last while, it's been a nice book to read in the sense that, it's got to do with South Africa. It's got to do with places and people that you hear about and things that you know. And as Malana had said, relatively young in age, but he would have been reading in the era prior to the establishment of apartheid, then apartheid for 54 years, which he refers to, and then, getting into the post-apartheid era. And I think the one thing that struck me in the beginning was the discussion around private spaces and how that further entrenches the new apartheid, and maybe that's something we can speak about, because if you think about it, I from time to time we get to play golf in some of these private estates, and he refers to these private estates, very sort of descriptively, and he talks about them, and he says, how do these private sort of fiefdoms, how do they further the agenda of what apartheid stood for? So, for example, in apartheid, there was white supremacy, right? These are my words. There was white supremacy, and as white supremacists, they sort of developed laws that marginalized minority, well, the majority of the country, but marginalized the voices of the majority Black people. They created laws to sort of, oppress them, etc., etc. And he says, just drawing a parallel to that and how it continues in today's time, is that in these private estates, firstly, the people who are first to get into these estates were these previously very well entrenched white elite, right? So they are the first to get into these estates. They are then the first to develop rules and laws in those estates for who gets to move in, what type of environment do they want to create, and what type of sort of atmosphere. And then in these estates, you get private clubs, you get sports facilities, you get education facilities, and now even to an extent, and you see the
residents associations.
Exactly. Yeah, disassociated from society. So disassociating, so giving up the system, right, in its formal sense, but then taking it into the private sphere and further entrenching it. So yeah, I mean, that was the first one that struck me, and I thought that it really resonated with me, because again, that's why I said it's about things that you see on a daily basis, and you're now able to put it into thoughts and feelings, So that was the first thing, that struck me of the book, is this idea that how private enterprise, whether it be private lodging and private estates, or private clubs, or even corporations, which he'll talk about later, or he does talk about in the book, and we may get into later, how that further entrenches what he calls this new apartheid.
If I can come on there about regarding spaces, right? I love the idea of how you mentioned about, the places where you play golf, and I hope your golf game is improving, right?
Not quite, yeah.
Yeah, I knew that, but like we always hope for the best and expect the worst. But anyway, must be optimistic, right? But for those of us that don't play golf, I'm sure golf is a lovely game, but I don't play golf, right? I'd like to one day, but not right now.
What do you go with it? would love to play golf. I thought you'll, you know.
It's a privatized sport. It entrenches
Easy
the new
privatized.
party. Don't play golf.
Right, but check this out. You know, when he talks about space, it's amazing how he talks about, like, you know, gated communities. We as South Africans, we always complain about crime. We talk about, like, you know, for example, if I hear, you know, my parents, when they speak about, you know, their childhood and their younger years, they'll talk about, you know, sometimes how safe it was. They could walk, you know, through town at night or in their neighborhoods at night without any fear of crime or anything like that. And we know that, you know, when it comes to gated communities, that's what a lot of people want. You know, they may be the very best of people, you know, but they just want to feel safe because crime is on the increase. But literally what these gated communities do, and it's a very, very big discussion, you know, not to dwell on it too much, but it does replicate apartheid. But, you know, when it comes to space, when you look at space within South Africa and how apartheid continues to perpetuate, or the legacies of apartheid continues to exist, think of, like, let's say the communities that you are from, you know, that you grow up in, that you currently live in, that you may work, right? Notice communities that were built during the apartheid era for white people, right? The residential areas particularly. You'll notice differences, and I take notice of this. A good friend of mine is like a specialist in urban design and architecture and things like that. So I've learned a little bit, right? So, you know, you'll notice things like how the pavement is actually nicer to walk on, how the roads are actually designed in a way that the drive is pleasant. You know, there's always this beautiful canopy of trees, you know, as you're driving through these neighborhoods. The road is designed in a way that even when it's wet, let's say your vehicle handling is better because the drainage is better. You look at the yard spaces, you look at the schools that were built in these neighborhoods, right? Beautiful. Now compare that to, let's say, schools and sidewalks and even municipal services that were built in, let's say, the Indian communities because of Group Areas Act, the colored communities because of Group Areas Act, and Black African communities because of Group Areas Act. Apartheid stacked us up in, like, you know, there's artificial racial hierarchy: whites, Indians, coloreds, and then Black people, right? Blacks. It did that, and as you're going through further down the hierarchy, you see worse services, right? So that's why schools in African communities were literally just produced to set up to create more manual laborers, as opposed to actually educate people for the purposes of growth, development, and progress. That's how I feel about space. Maulana, you actually grew up in Alex. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about this, your experiences there.
And Maulana can, and I think that's going to be a nice one because he talks about the privatized space of Sandton and how Sandton has become, you know, sort of a figure of that privatization. How the CBD through time, you know, was sort of moved away from and into Sandton, and how that further entrenches. So Maulana, maybe just as an idea, maybe you want to talk about your experience and how you saw this sort of new city come up and what your feelings were also.
I mean, just to give an example, and I'll tell you, you know, Allahu Akbar. You know, sometimes these things are so emotional. You know, when you really think back. You know, I'll tell you something. When I was in Egypt, I had a friend of mine, and I was staying with him in the village. It's called Abu Qair village.
Actually, you forgot to say in your humble stay in Egypt. You're supposed to be. You have to get into personality.
Okay, so in my humble stay in Egypt, and, you know, this was in Alexandria, and we stayed in a place called Abu Qair, and Abu Qair is a beautiful place. I mean, we were like 3 minutes away from the beach. The village, it's like a village. The people were lovely. They loved us because we were from South Africa, and I was also the imam in one of the mosques there. The stay was beautiful, and I had this friend of mine, and the one day I remember we went to Alexandria, like in the CBD, and he wanted to go to toilet. And I said to him, he said to me, hey, you know what, we need to go back quickly, or else we need to look for, by a garage or something for a bathroom. So I said to him, here's McDonald's, they have normally have bathrooms inside. So he said to me, La wallah. He said, nah, no, I promise you no. I said, why? He said, how am I going to go in there? You know, and it just seemed to him that, you know, you're not supposed to set foot. These are places for like high class people, and that, and this is how I used to feel when we used to go to Sandton.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
when we used to come to Sandton, I actually, you know, to such a stage, because we grew up in this Alex, and you know, you grow up with multiracial, different ethnicities, the Zulu, Xhosa, foreigners, and you always see everything is small, and everything is, you know, most of the places were shacks, and you know, things were just on top of each other, you know, it's just this. And now when you come to Sandton and when you see these places, you know, you just feel that inferiority complex coming into you. And you, I mean, there were shops in Sandton, and there were places where you wouldn't even want to go in because you'll just feel that you'll be judged, or our youth, mashallah, in today's time, they don't have these feelings and that, but we grew up with this here, you know.
Mm.
So I really, you know, when he speaks about this space and that, this is what I can relate to, you know, growing up in Alex and that, and then looking at the Sandton coming up in that. I mean, we were always under the notion that this is not for us, and the only time that we would really go to Sandton or these places, even though they had all of these games and all of these entertainment and whatever, and the only time we would go is maybe when your mother has a bonus or something like that and wants to buy you a new pair of shoes or whatever. But
do you still feel that? Do you still feel that way? And this is what he's challenging, right? He's challenging that. Do you still see elements of that in today's society in Sandton? You may not feel the same because you now have access to it, right? That's what he's saying. He's saying that as much as they've given a sense that everything is open now and barriers have been broken, there are still entrenched policies that further, you know, the agenda of apartheid. Do you still, I mean, is there still things that you can reason that you can say, you know, still makes you see that in Sandton today?
I mean, one of the things I wouldn't really, you know, I didn't really go that far thinking about it, but I would say that there's still, I mean, buying, even if it's normal food and the prices of the things that you need to buy, and that it's still, you know, as much as it's still for a certain class, you know, for a certain category. Not everybody.
But I mean, the new apartheid basically is based on class, right? That he's talking about, because when he says that the majority of South Africans are excluded from where, you know, whether it be spaces, whether it be access to law, you know, and the way people are punished, and, you know, in the different chapters of the book, literally he's saying that if you know, irrespective of your race, were able to raise into a certain class bracket, right, an economic bracket where you can afford things, right, then you can enter into these spaces. But because majority of the time, let's say the rules, the customs, the entire culture of a space, of a place, even of our legal system, right, was not determined for the majority of South Africans by the majority of South Africans. It was decided by a minority, still for the benefit of the minority, right? So people, you know, you can be an Indian, colored, or black person in a formerly white space, but you may feel a little bit out of place because the space was not designed really for you. You're coming into that world. Now you have to adapt, but it doesn't really necessarily reflect you and your, let's say, and doesn't necessarily reflect yourself, you know, and where you come from.
You're 100% correct. I mean, like, you take places like, for example, Alex. How many people really up until now go to Sandton? You know, how many people can afford to go to Sandton, or you know, so taking that into, you know, you still see that what apartheid accomplished after that, it's just a reattribution of apartheid in a different way, or different customs, and like you said, different customs and laws, and that, which still has that, and just has allowed a few to be able to get into that system.
But I mean, even when we're looking at law, right, the law of the country now, South Africa's constitution, generally it's celebrated throughout the entire world, right? It's been a very progressive constitution, often called like the best constitution currently standing. It's a document that South African presidents, whether you're Cyril Ramaphosa or Jacob Zuma, right? These two individuals are different, even though they come from the same political party, right? We're involved in the same political struggle. Both of them celebrate the constitution, right? So there's this feeling of the constitutional triumphism, that the constitution triumphs over all. The constitution is this product of a successful transition from apartheid to a democracy, a non-racial democracy. So it gives you, this, the image that comes into your mind is like, someone switching on and off the light, right? But we know that when we're talking about how apartheid exists, think more about how the sun sets and the moon rises and day and night alternates, right? And that's a parable of time. South African law is still written in a way where let's say justice isn't very adequately defined. The concept of justice is lacking. The constitution rests on the idea of, the historical event of negotiating a peaceful transition from apartheid to South Africa, mashallah, right? But it's like, this is like the end of history almost. This is like the end of the line. Since we've produced this constitution, this legal document that everyone needs to abide by and live by in the country, all our problems are solved because we're all equal before the law. Totally ignoring what? People's historical circumstances. And that is one of the ways in which I feel apartheid continues to exist. As a student of fiqh, and I love fiqh, right? It's a beautiful thing. But sometimes Muslim societies, we feel like, we are going to solve problems with fiqh alone, right? As if like, the Quran and the Sunnah were just like legislative documents, like the Quran revealed as a document was just a book of rules, right and wrong, do's and don'ts. And the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, our beloved leader and guiding teacher, he was just explaining these rules in his Sunnah. We're not seeing beyond that. And I think South Africans, when we're approaching the constitution, not comparable with Revelation, but, we have this mind that, we have law and law solves all of our problems. But when the law is skewed, not set up right, and human beings are much more complex than just right and wrong, there's those gray areas, it leaves us stuck.
Yeah.
It does. Correct.
Yeah, look, I must say that when I was thinking about the part around when he talks about the constitution and how the constitution in one way is used as a document was used as a document for the ANC to sort of say, this is what we're able to produce coming out of our negotiations and what we want to set ourselves on the path to sort of, to economic freedom, on the path to equal housing, in the path to education for all, at the same time, it being a liberal sort of democracy and a document that establishes all of that. He does poke holes into the constitution extensively. And I mean, those were very, it was sort of, those were, he used a lot of legal terminology and he calls upon the reader to actually to think deeper about a lot of sections within the constitution. And in fact, he brings it at the end too, where he actually makes a few suggestions for revisions and then points out which sections, section 4, section 4B, etc., and what in those sections he believes should be revisited. It is an interesting discussion in the book. One that I did also grapple with, I won't, as a reader, I felt that I felt like almost I needed to go and read the Constitution, that in order to get to an understanding what he was saying, because as much as it offers all those freedoms, it still is a tool for subjugation, and how he draws that that parallel. between the two, of course, reads and maybe a bit more discussion. I don't know if you picked it up specifically. Maybe you can explain it to me, Anwar.
Well, when I was reading the section on law and how the author looks at the Constitution, right? And I mean, for example, he raises mainly three areas. The first one we mentioned about the Constitution's conception of justice, right? The second would be particularly about the relationship between private law and public law, particularly when he's talking about contracts, right? And then he talks about this very historical reading of the Constitution, like the Constitution is our key to this better life for all, as the ANC always likes to say, right? Rest on the successful transition of South Africa from apartheid in 1994. But there's questions about those negotiations, and he asked them in the book. And I felt as I was reading this here that okay, alhamdulillah, I have had the opportunity of reading the Constitution of the country. A friend of mine who I really feel that at some point we need to host for discussion with us on this podcast, Brother Mohammed Zakariya, excellent human being, a specialist in the Constitution, a lawyer, even worked in the Constitutional Court. We need to have him on with us to discuss the Constitution. Because I feel that no young person should be ignorant of the South African Constitution, its pros and its cons, and as Muslims especially, the Constitution, yes, it's a man-made document, but we can see, like even today, how important constitutional rights are for different sectors within the South African community. Look at the issue with the marriage bill and equality. That's something that's affecting the South African Muslim community.
I didn't pick it up. Gents, do you know what was the outcome of today's discussion? I know there was a section where...
No, Zakariya, that's your baby, because you've been dealing with that one.
Did you follow up? Did you follow anything today, Zakariya?
I was watching, there was a live video, but then I went for, I think so, I probably went for Zohar because it was going right through. But I knew that they were listening to... They were listening to the Women's League forwarding there. I don't know what was the outcome. I actually was going to pick it up later and see what.
Yeah. Anwar, you never. I honestly, do you know what was the score at the close of play?
No, unfortunately not. It was a bit of a busy day, but it's something I'm going to be checking up tonight. Okay. But the point still stands that how we engage the Constitution and what rights does it afford South Africans. But at the end of the day, how rights may be there, but how we engage that document, and does it adequately represent us? Also, I want to say this with regards to the Constitution, considering, and this is going to be a recurrent issue, considering the type of looting and riots, civil unrest that we experienced just about 2-3 weeks ago, there is this idea that we are a functioning constitutional democracy, and as a functioning constitutional democracy, we're not going to be a failed state, right? South Africa is not going to turn into a banana republic, right, where there is no rule of law. But if we do not actually know and engage our Constitution as citizens, right, the Constitution may not be our saving grace. Active citizenship and participation is very much let's say a means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with to use in this country, and we should be using it, right? To discharge our responsibilities towards our fellow human beings and to enjoy living in this beautiful country. But also we need to engage this Constitution. When he speaks about technology, and there's something I really want to quote, paraphrase rather from his book, about how technology itself can perpetuate the new apartheid. He says, paraphrasing here, algorithms are weapons of math destruction and mass distraction, which threaten to humanize machines and mechanize humans, right? We all know what social media addiction can do to a person. You can lose touch with reality while even having the tool that should be connecting you to reality. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf talks about the cell phone as what these mobile hallucinations that we carry in our pockets, right? But when seeing this discussion about technology and the use of technology, is perpetuating apartheid. And I mean, I'm no expert, right? But it's fascinating that, here is this young Muslim political scientist that's already looking at the impact of technology within our republic.
And
Brilliant.
I mean, again, because we're so close to it, that was the most exciting of all the chapters in the book. It's almost the one day where the penny drops, because here he's saying that, firstly, let's talk a bit about how algorithms group people together, and he brings the term, I wasn't aware of this term before, homophily, which is about people who people who share similar interests. Because why do you on your Twitter timeline see only brown people, for example? Or why do you only see Islamic content? Because they've already gone in and basically segmented society. And so what happens is white people see white people, and white people see what white people like, and brown people see what brown people like, and the discussions that ensue is all in support of sort of the psychology of what brown people are meant to be talking about, believing in, and sort of furthering in terms of their interests. And he goes into this at length. And for me, the penny dropped when he went into this discussion, because this is what he's saying. He's saying that as much as apartheid is a legacy issue, right, or seen to be a legacy issue, it's not in fact a legacy issue. It has perpetuated itself. It continues in today's time. And then it even shows, like, through surveillance, through what black people get fed in terms of the quotes you get, in terms of insurance, you get higher premiums quoted to you. You get certain news brought to you. All of these things, really, that for me was fascinating, the way he did that. For me, of course, as I said, was the most interesting topic in the book.
I mean, like, for example, when Facebook is suggesting groups, or pages that you would like, this is exactly that. As an example, right? The group suggestions and things like that there, because ultimately it's curating your content, and it will take note that, okay, South African male brown person, South African male white person, South African female, let's say, white person as well. And then you get slotted, you get content that's like tailor-made for you, but you're not interacting with this vast array of society. And for lockdown, like, this is particularly interesting, because whatever level of lockdown we're in, with this adjusted level 3, at least in South Africa, you not necessarily getting a chance to go out and interact with a large and diverse group of people. So you could be at home, social distancing from the rest of society, and your only tool to communicate with the rest of the world is our techno toys. But your techno toys, because of the algorithms that are at play by the people that design these tools, which are not us, right? And that's a failure of our civilization currently. I'm talking the Islamic civilization. What are we sitting with? We're sitting with a situation where we be segregated from other human beings.
Indeed.
And one of the things that I could really appreciate when, reading this book and looking at how, he took an etymological approach in defining the word apartheid, because what
etymological approach? Not everyone studied Nahu and Sarf, because Sarf, they call it etymology. It's such a big word. What is etymological approach?
What he did is basically he broke it down. Okay. And what he did is he broke it into different parts, so that you can now look at it from. So what happens in Surf is that where when you
what is Surf now? I'm putting you on the question.
You can ask me what is morphology. So basically, Surf is the change.
Simple, Sheikh Zakariya, right? I mean, we know you're a legal scholar of the Sharia, mashallah. But I mean, Surf at the end of the day is the study of verbs. And what are verbs? I'll be honest, right? I was no master of English grammar until I started to study Arabic. No, really, right? Before you came to me and you asked me what's a noun, I just knew the dictionary definition that I needed to pass an English paper in school. It said a noun is a what is
the name of a people or place?
Place, right? That's it. And what's a verb? A verb is a doing word, like run, jump, hop, skip. Yeah. That's all I understood. Then when I started to study Arabic, right, I was like, oh, okay, Surf is a study of verbs, of actual actions that are taking place. So yeah,
Yeah,
when you
so
break
go
it down
for it, Malana. We
So
now
anyway,
know
yeah,
what
the
etymology and morphology
is
is.
yeah.
so in this etymology, what he did is basically he took this word apart and he says it there where he says what it does is he excavates and disentombs the theory that of apartheid, that it was buried. So he brings about this whole understanding of it. And one of the things that there's two things that I appreciated. One was his figurative and his the figure and his metaphor of how the words that he used. And I think so this is one thing that you can really appreciate of the author, is that he is very eloquent. He's extremely eloquent in his choice of words, but not only extremely eloquent, he is almost something like a poet, because the way he puts these words, he creates an image, in the way he chooses. And that is when you study Balagha, that is one of the most important things, fi fannil bayan, in your fun of how to use words. And the whole kitab of Balagha is to bring
What's
about.
balagha now? You need to translate these terminology for our audience. What is balagha?
Balagha is, eloquence
Yeah.
in the word, how to eloquently, use the right word at the right time, when he uses these words like apartheid, and you can really see that as we're speaking now, he brought apartheid in economic, in the technology. He brought it. He even makes a reader, and he's well referenced, and he makes you also go back and check what happened in 1990, what happened in 1994. Who's Hendrik Verwoerd? What happened when they did the Bantustan X, and so you read all of this. Yeah, one of the things that I could appreciate, and what I was looking at, I don't know if if you're caught on this, was that he brought the way he explained apartheid makes us understand. There's one very interesting read of Roman Grasfugel, and he speaks of the structure of knowledge, and in there he speaks of the Cartesian philosophy. And one of the things that he makes mention in this Cartesian philosophy is that this type of thinking came from, or this thinking that we have in today's time also, it came from the 5 white men. And then he mentions the countries, he mentions that, he says that, for example, Italy, France, England, Germany, and the USA, they are the ones that, went into the socio-historical philosophy and all of this. I mean, if you look in university, just go and look at any author of the book, and then you'll find that they are from one of these 5 countries. They're the ones that, and one of the things,
majority of cases, yeah.
Majority of cases. And one of the things that we need to understand is that this word apartheid, as you're explaining it now, don't confuse it with racism or slavery that we had in the past. This is a whole type of new system that they came with of apartheid, which was not in the past. So even when we speak of slavery, so look at how they used their skills of one of the things that he spoke about was that they even managed to put people together, squeeze them together, but make them further apart. And you look at the riots in KwaZulu-Natal, for example. It's in one area, but look at how much of destruction it's caused. It's in a small space. So,
no, but
yes,
if I may interject here, we're talking about small spaces, right? Now people have been squeezed together, but this is how can I say, something that hasn't been changed on the physical ground, and it's one of the legacies of apartheid. And our parents and our forebears loved to, through apartheid, observe this, right? I mean, when people were being kicked out of places like District 6 and Fitas, right? They really experienced this firsthand as they were pushed into, segregated communities. The Group Areas Act, right? That a white neighborhood and a black neighborhood and a colored neighborhood and Indian neighborhood, basically anybody that was non-white, it could sometimes be a single road, that divides one neighborhood from another. And when you stand on that road, whether you're driving on it, walking on it, cycling on it, or playing marbles, right? If you look to your one side, you might see a different kind of development, and you look to your other on the other side, and you will see a different kind of development. Two very different and contrasting communities.
It's still around. You still see it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he's saying. He's saying that privatization, that ability to still maintain those boundaries, is what's furthering the agenda of apartheid.
So
Malana reminded me about the discussion where he drew, and this is what we actually, or at least I was attempting to bring to the discussion tonight, was to say, where were we in the past and how is it still perpetuating in the future? And you reminded me about the Bantustans, and he talked about how the Bantustans was a project of the apartheid government to basically segregate even the Black African population based on their, what would you say? What would be the right word? Not ethnic background, but sort of their native language and culture. So Sisutu and
native language,
it's their native languages. KwaZulu Natal and so forth. And then how does that then carry over into the new apartheid in the so-called New South Africa? Is that yes, those territories are still maintained in terms of the kings of those territories. They still get a stipend, and they still have a political mindset that they are being driven towards. As much as
they have political power because they hold important political spaces. And they are paramount in politics.
And this is part of that shackling of their mind. So as much as they want the New South Africa, but they don't want to do away with their Bantustan sort of power that they got, because again, powers are at play throughout this entire system of the new apartheid. And it perpetuates itself in multiple.
So they give them that power, but they are still the ones who are in real power. But it's just a concept that
Well, this is what I want to ask you guys, right? So I don't want to. It's sort of the popular thinking is that, and maybe it's a question from my side, and really I'm looking to see how you guys think about it, because the idea that apartheid. So a lot of people will say, what the NP, and he talks about the NP extensively in this book. What they gave up was sort of political authority, but they kept the economy, right? And that's what a lot of people say. A lot of people say,
yes,
we got freedom, but we did not get the economy, and therefore our freedom is half won.
Incomplete.
I don't know how you guys want to chat a bit about that.
No, but I mean, but that's really the crux of the book itself, right? What took place, let's say, during the early 1990s, while freedom fighters and the Nationalist Party, the apartheid government, they were actually sitting and negotiating what the new South Africa is going to be like, and the economic freedom was conceded basically to a white minority, and this white minority, well, at least its negotiators and its strategists, right? And you know what? Business was playing both sides, right? Business was already engaging anti-apartheid activists, and they were engaging government. That's why you can have like places like Orania, which was actually set up as just another town, right? The town gets bought out. The town gets bought out.
What a discussion! It's only in the
town gets bought out
that you're jogging my memory, because look, I mean, I never came to you. I didn't come to the discussion preparing notes and so forth. But as we get into it, we're almost up to 45 minutes. But as now we're getting in, I think we all jogging each other. That was a fascinating discussion about Orania.
Extremely. But like, for example, like the fact that someone, Hendrik Verwoerd's son-in-law, could basically buy a town from state or from another private owner who attempted to buy it from government, right? Yeah. A person could buy an entire town and essentially create like a private residence, a security complex, a gated community that happens to be an entire town. I think, in my opinion, Orania like sets the tone for like segregated communities that legally exist. Wow. Now, Orania, I mean, this is as far I'm concerned. I mean, it's supposed to be about a preserve of culture, a little like an enclave of Afrikaner culture. right? And language and traditions, right? A space for people who feel very, very threatened, right? But compared to other gated communities, Orania is based on race and culture. Other gated and private communities are really just based on class, right?
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. When we're speaking about this, we do not have a problem with wealth. We all love money. Let's face, let's admit that fact. Islam itself actually desires a rich society, right? And there's nothing wrong with wealth. The problem is that when wealth is used as an oppressive tool, like what happens with a gated society, what happens with a shopping mall that really, like, bars different types of people from being able to even enter or feel comfortable in those spaces. How technology works. Reading him, and I want to say this really about technology because it's been on my mind. We talk about the fiqh of social media, right? A fiqh of social media. And I even spoke to one of my teachers in the week. I just texted him. I said, Sheikh, I think that you should run a course on social media, right? Like, this is very, very important. And it is important, right? Okay, his answer to me was like, I think you should rather go do it because I'm very, very busy, but he put it in a very polite way, right? But he encouraged me to do it. But anyway, I'll encourage one of you guys to do it. But when we talk about, before we can even talk about the fiqh of social media.
You're trying to say we're not busy.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that, right? But if that's what you want to admit, I mean, that's your issue. Like, deal with that, right? It's cool. But the thing is, before we can actually write out a fiqh of social media, right? Can we actually understand the entire philosophy behind social media itself? What is its design? What is it supposed to be enabled, supposed to do? Its consequences, its repercussions. It's beautiful.
Well, I want to bring in an arbitrary thought that I've been having for the last hour, 2 hours as I was driving. I actually, and this got nothing related to the book, but very much to social media. I said to myself, imagine someone in 30 years' time or 20 years' time saying, my father was a great man. He was a famous TikToker. Like, is that something people are going to be proud of? Like, is that something people are going to be proud of in today's society, that in 20 years' time he's going to be lauded for being TikToker? Anyway, I just thought about that.
I mean, you look at, it's correct, it's interesting how we brought social media into the whole. I mean, I never thought of it in that way, where even on Facebook and you sometimes, you're overwhelmed by, you're just talking of something and then you when you're browsing through Facebook, you see the advert comes. Of that. I don't know if it happened to you all,
No, that's the algorithm at play, definitely. Maybe, Anwar, don't you think we should try and conclude now? Maybe perhaps quickly on punishment. Maybe
I actually did want to talk to you guys about that, because I mean, this is a real one, but we're not going to be too long on this one here, right? But it's important to say, how do we deal with punishments within the South African constitution, but more so in society, right? We know that our country, unfortunately, is plagued by crime, right? Unfortunately, right? That's one of the legacies of apartheid, because when there is little to no economic opportunity for people to grow and develop, to break the poverty cycle, people are going to resort to crime, right? The type of punishments that convicted criminals will receive, unfortunately, in the new South Africa, right? It really is dependent on how you are connected, right? And he talks about, the privatization of South Africa's criminal punishment system. And, he talks about the idea that, we have politicians, right? And business people and private citizens, right? And government employees who may commit the worst crimes in this country, but are literally going to get away with a slap on the wrist, right? For the crimes. I mean, the Guptas, right? We're inviting everybody to eat curry and curry khichdi in their compound here in north of Joburg, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, where are these people? Some of the criminals, and these people are criminals, that were sitting there and eating curry khichdi and biryani, well, you know what I mean? They just got a slap on the wrist, right?
Yeah.
And their supporters were willing to turn the country inside out. Yeah, Jacob Zuma supporters, I'm speaking to you, right? That's what I'm referring to, right? They were willing to turn this country inside out simply because Jacob Zuma got his day in the court, and now we were seeing some semblance of justice, right? But I mean, he wasn't even indicted for his crimes just because he was like in contempt of court. But then the average ordinary citizen who can't pay his way out, right? Let him commit an offense, and the law will come down on him like a 10-ton of bricks.
Yeah.
Right? It will break his or her back.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Yeah, I mean, just to interject on what you're saying, and so mashallah for raising that point, and you know, like they say, Allah alaik, you know, may Allah bless you for using this punishment. I mean, there was a video that went viral where they showed this lady who was selling on the side of the road, and these traffic officers came, they were taking away her stuff, and she was like just a vendor, normal vendor, and they were so harsh on her because, and I remember when I was in Fordsburg, you would see them pulling up, and what they would do is just, the guys actually, those that would survive would actually just get their stuff together and just move from there, because what they would do is come and take your stuff and just shove it into the van. And so now, like you were saying, you're looking at these people who are trying to make a living, who don't have enough of money, and this is how they are with them. And then what about these businesses and these big businesses that you know, for example, selling stuff which is expired, or you know,
Exactly.
doing type of businesses.
I think we're going to have to end now, Sidi Anwar. On punishment, I think he talks a bit about where the origins of the numbers within South African correctional services come from. You should go and read it. People should read it. It's very interesting discussion. He talks about the fact that private security in South Africa is privatized, owned by majority, you know, white private institutions, but employ almost triple the South African police force, some 10,000 people and so forth, and fulfilling roles of gatekeeping, you know, this privatized apartheid. So we should look into that. And then, of course, he ends the book with a bit of his own reflections and why he wrote the book. And he's also critique. He critiques his own approach and says perhaps where there can be more gaps and where, you know, others can maybe come in and fill in. But I do think we're going to have to wrap it up, gentlemen.
Inshallah, definitely. And on that point, and I appreciate this, and as a last point that I'd like to make, when you talk about apathy in the criminal justice system, right? Yeah. We all know that a lot of us feel that the South African police service is so incompetent, right? That even if they have all the evidence in front of them, they won't be able to get a conviction, right? So what do a lot of us do? We have like our homes and our cars and items insured, right? Allah forbid, but if if it gets stolen, what do you want to do? What do you want the police to do? You literally want to go to the to a police station, report the crime, fill out a police docket, right? Simply so that you can submit that statement and docket for an insurance claim, right? And there are criminals, and these people are criminals that are getting away with wholesale economic and political crime, just like how other criminals, I'm talking about apartheid era, oppressors from the former South African SADF and the former South African police force in Flak Plus and it, who got away with basically crimes against humanity, right? And we have not been able basically to bring them to book and get them basically their day in court and let them answer for their crimes and let justice be served. This is a fascinating book, considering last week's discussion that we had about Islam, Muslims, and the role, the future of South Africa. I think to be able to understand the future of South Africa and the role that Muslims play, reading Brother Sizwe Mpofu's new book, Mpofu Walsh's new book.
May I render the last passage of his ending, if you don't mind?
Yeah,
just
no
to
problem.
end
I'm saying this book is important.
Yeah.
Shukran.
So
go ahead.
He says on page 179 in conclusion, this book is thus not
we'll
about...
all open up the book.
Okay, yeah, you can open it up. Page 179, the last. So he says, this book is thus not about solving South Africa's problems. It is about defining its central problem. Before we can dream of defeating the new apartheid, we must first behold its monumental scale and omnidirectional reach. Overcoming the new apartheid will require breathtaking imagination and unmatched wisdom over several generations. It demands the painful reassessment of long-held creeds. The defeat of new apartheid requires all the fortitude of a new liberation movement, fixed on the ideal of a second true independence. For, in the words of Shireen Hassan, the central question of our time is, what was it that people were struggling for over centuries, and what have we got?
Allah, Allah, Allah. Beautiful. MashaAllah. MashaAllah.
Okay,
And
brothers,
that's a great
thank you so much. It was really awesome.
point to conclude on. Shukran
أحلى من
jazeelan.
العسل.
ما شاء الله.
Shoot.
سورة الكوثر. تفضلوا يا
نعم.
مولانا. You can do us a rendering tonight. Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر.
سورة العصر يعني يا سيدي.
بسم الله الرحمن
فدويتنا مقرأ من دويتنا نايس قراءة من فضلكم.
إن شاء الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.
ما شاء الله.
Allah, mashallah, mashallah.
خير.
Shukran jazeelan, gentlemen. We'll see you guys next week, inshallah. It is Women's Month, so the next topic next week is going to have to deal about with Women's Month.
Okay,
but we're going to throw a different spin on it. I have thoughts in my mind that I want to share with you guys. So until then, gentlemen, shukran jazeelan.
Please remind our people that inshallah we'll be sending to subscribe to our page on YouTube and to subscribe to our new Facebook. We'll be sending the links inshallah. And we thank all of the, I see mashallah we had quite a few from Botswana also. I can see on my Facebook some of them from Botswana, some from Fordsburg, some from Joburg, a lot of my friends from Somalia. So mashallah, inshallah, you know, Allah increase this.
Ameen.
Ameen.
Shukran jazeelan, brothers.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Barakallahu fikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wa fika barak.